Buckle up, folks, because today on Boss Economics World, we're diving headfirst into the steaming dumpster fire that is the European Union's economic competitiveness, or should I say, the lack thereof. That's right, we're here to satirize the economic problems, roast the government's mismanagement, and shine a spotlight on the clowns in Brussels who are driving the EU straight into a recessionary ditch. And oh boy, do we have a juicy story to unpack today, courtesy of a Business Europe survey that's basically a 500-page neon sign screaming, the EU is screwed. So, grab your popcorn, your calculators, and your pitchforks, because it's time to expose the economic absurdity in governmental incompetence that's bleeding Europe dry. Let's go. Here's the deal, folks, according to a bombshell report from Business Europe, a key lobby group representing the biggest business federations across Europe, 85.7% of their members are sounding the alarm that Donald Trump's deregulation frenzy in the US is siphoning investment away from the EU faster than you can say, bureaucratic nightmare. And guess what? 0%, that's right, nada, zilch, nothing, of these business leaders think Trump's moves are good news for Europe. Ouch. That's not just a red flag, that's a red flag factory on fire, spewing toxic smoke over the entire continent. Now, before we dive into the nitty-gritty, let's set the stage. This report dropped just one day before EU leaders were set to gather in Brussels for a summit, where they were supposed to tackle the bloc's waning competitiveness. Spoiler alert, they're not gonna fix it. Why? Because the EU is a masterclass in government mismanagement, drowning in red tape, and moving at the speed of a sloth on a coffee break. Meanwhile, across the pond, Trump's administration is slashing regulations faster than a ninja with a machete, and investors are flocking to the US like it's an all-you-can-eat buffet. And who can blame them? If you're a business, are you going to invest in a streamlined, business-friendly US or a bureaucratic EU hellscape where you need 47 permits just to open a lemonade stand? Exactly. Let's start with the core issue here, excessive regulation. According to Business Europe, their members see regulation as the #1 challenge facing European businesses, more pressing than high energy prices, which, by the way, are already insane thanks to the EU's botched energy policies. We'll get to that later. The report is basically screaming, hey, Brussels, your obsession with micromanaging everything is killing us. And the data backs this up. Foreign direct investment, FDI, inflows into the EU have been tanking. In 2022, FDI into the EU dropped by a staggering 22.7% compared to the previous year, according to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. Meanwhile, the US saw FDI inflows increase by 6.2% over the same period. Coincidence? I think not. Lucio Vinhas de Souza, Business Europe's chief economist, put it perfectly. The climate for investment in the EU has worsened essentially because of the increase in the regulatory burden that we have all observed in the past few years. Translation, the EU is strangling its own economy with red tape, and businesses are running for the hills. And here's the kicker, over the past 7 years, the EU's position in global FDI has worsened abysmally. 7 years. That's not a blip, that's a full-blown economic disaster. But hey, at least the EU is great at writing 1,000-page rulebooks that nobody reads, right? Now, let's talk specifics. Take the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, for example. Sure, it's great for protecting privacy, but it's also a compliance nightmare for businesses, especially small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs. A 2023 study by the European Commission itself found that SMEs spend up to 4.7% of their annual turnover just on GDPR compliance. That's money that could be spent on innovation, hiring, or expansion, but instead, it's being funneled into hiring lawyers and consultants to navigate the EU's regulatory labyrinth. And don't even get me started on the EU's new Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, which is set to impose even more reporting obligations on businesses starting in 2024. Because apparently, what Europe needs is more paperwork, not less. Now, you might be thinking, okay, boss economics, the EU knows it has a problem, so they're fixing it, right? Oh, sweet summer child, how naive you are. Sure, Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission President, has made cutting red tape a priority, and she's proposed a bunch of measures to simplify reporting obligations. Sounds great, right? Except there's one tiny problem, the EU moves slower than a snail stuck in molasses. Meanwhile, the US is a well-oiled machine when it comes to deregulation. As Vinhas de Souza put it, we are now comparing apples and oranges. The very difference in terms of the speeds between the two systems does mean that there will be a period in which the US will have enacted its deregulation actions while we are still in the process of doing that. Translation, by the time the EU gets around to cutting a single piece of red tape, the US will have slashed a whole forest of it. And here's the thing, the EU's sluggishness isn't just a minor inconvenience, it's a full-blown economic death sentence. According to a 2023 report by the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the EU's productivity growth has lagged behind the US by an average of 0.8 percentage points annually over the past decade. Why? Because businesses in the US can innovate and expand without drowning in bureaucracy, while EU businesses are stuck filling out forms in triplicate. And with Trump's deregulation push in full swing, that gap is only going to widen. Just look at the numbers. In 2023, the US/2,200 federal regulations, according to the White House Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. Meanwhile, the EU added 1,300 new regulations over the same period, per the European Commission's own data. Gee, I wonder why investors are fleeing Europe. Oh, but wait, there's more. Remember how I said we'd get to the EU's botched energy policies? Well, buckle up, because this one's a doozy. The BusinessEurope report highlighted high energy prices as a major challenge for businesses, and for good reason. Thanks to the EU's obsession with green energy, without a coherent plan to actually make it affordable, energy costs in Europe are through the roof. In 2023, industrial electricity prices in the EU averaged 25 cents per kilowatt-hour, compared to just 8 cents in the US, according to Eurostat and the US Energy Information Administration. That's more than 3 times higher. And don't even get me started on natural gas prices, which spiked to record highs in 2022 after the EU's genius decision to sanction Russian gas without securing alternative supplies. Now, I'm all for saving the planet, but here's the thing, if your green policies are so expensive that businesses can't afford to operate, you're not saving the planet, you're just killing your economy. Just look at Germany, the EU's so-called economic powerhouse. In 2023, German industrial production fell by 4.8%, according to Destatus, largely due to sky-high energy costs. And it's not just Germany. Across the EU, energy-intensive industries like steel, chemicals, and manufacturing are shutting down or relocating to countries with cheaper energy, like the US or China. But hey, at least the EU can pat itself on the back for being green, right? Now, let's connect the dots here, folks. Why is the EU in this mess? Is it just bad luck? A global conspiracy? Nope, it's government mismanagement, plain and simple. The EU's leaders have spent years prioritizing ideology over pragmatism, piling on regulations in the name of protection, while ignoring the fact that businesses are suffocating. And when they do try to fix things, they move so slowly that the problem gets worse before it gets better. Meanwhile, the US is eating Europe's lunch because it's willing to make tough, pragmatic decisions, like slashing regulations and keeping energy costs low. And here's the kicker, this isn't just about businesses. Ordinary people are suffering, too. According to Eurostat, the EU's unemployment rate ticked up to 6.7% in 2023, while youth unemployment remains stubbornly high at 14.5%. Why? Because businesses aren't hiring, they're too busy trying to survive the EU's regulatory onslaught. And with investment fleeing to the US, job creation in Europe is grinding to a halt. But hey, at least the EU's leaders can sleep soundly knowing they've protected us from the horrors of cheap energy and economic growth. Here's the harsh truth, folks, the EU is on a one-way train to Recessionville, and the government is the conductor. Between excessive regulation, sky-high energy costs, and a laughably slow pace of reform, Europe is bleeding investment, jobs, and economic growth. And with Trump's deregulation push giving the US a massive competitive advantage, the gap between the two economies is only going to widen. According to a 2023 forecast by the European Central Bank, EU GDP growth is expected to limp along at just 0.8% in 2024, while the US is projected to grow at 2.5%, per the Federal Reserve. That's not just a gap, that's a Grand Canyon. So, what's the solution? Well, if the EU wants to avoid economic Armageddon, it needs to wake up, smell the coffee, and start slashing regulations, lowering energy costs, and moving at a pace faster than a glacier. But let's be real, given the track record of the clowns in Brussels, I'm not holding my breath. In the meantime, my advice to investors, businesses, and anyone with a pulse is simple, get out of Europe while you still can, because this ship is sinking faster than the Titanic. And there you have it, folks, another episode of Boss Economics World, where we expose the economic absurdity and governmental incompetence that's screwing over ordinary people and businesses alike. If you're as fed up as I am with the EU's clown show, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and share this video with everyone you know. And to all you financial professionals out there, keep crunching those numbers and calling out the nonsense, because if we don't, who will? Until next time, stay savvy, stay angry, and remember, the government isn't here to save you, it's here to screw you. Boss Economics out.